Chapter 1. The Daughter Who Carried What No One Saw. If your family asked you to sign papers while your father was dying, would you ever imagine those same papers would one day erase you? My mother gave my brother full legal power behind my back. My family trust was rewritten without me, and the business I quietly held together for years collapsed the moment I stopped fixing their mistakes. I did not scream. I did not sue. I simply stepped away and watched the consequences arrive on their own. My name is Maren, and this is the story of how my family used love to control me, and how silence became the most powerful thing I ever chose. The freeway lights smeared into long ribbons on my windshield, and I could tell I was already too late before my phone buzzed again. I kept both hands on the wheel anyway, the way I always did when my family called. Not because I was calm, but because I had learned to look calm. The kind of calm that makes other people believe you have it handled so they can let go. My name is Maren Caldwell. I'm 43, and I was driving back toward Maple Ridge, the quiet suburb outside Richmond where I grew up. I had left the office in downtown Richmond after a day that should have ended with a promotion meeting and a glass of water I never drank. Instead, I was watching the exit signs tick by like a countdown. When I was a kid, Maple Ridge felt like a place where nothing bad could happen. Neat lawns, porch lights, mothers who waved from driveways. Now, it felt like a net. Every time I tried to step away, something tugged. Something needed me. Something broke. The phone buzzed again. I did not answer. I knew the message before I saw it. It would be my mother, Diane, reminding me that family comes first, in the same tone she used to remind me to wipe my feet at the door. I finally glanced down at the screen when the road straightened. Just 4 words. Call me when you can. No urgency, no details, just the assumption that I would, that I always would. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself that being dependable was a virtue. I told myself a lot of things, back when I still believed love and expectation were the same thing. In 2011, I moved back on purpose. I had a job I liked in the city, a clean little apartment with a view of the river, and the kind of quiet that felt earned. Then, my father got sick the first time. Not the big illness, not yet, just enough to scare my mother and make her voice change on the phone. "Your dad has been forgetting things," she said, like she was telling me the weather. "The doctor thinks it is stress. We just need you closer." I remember standing in my kitchen with a fork in my hand, staring at a plate of food I suddenly could not swallow. I had learned early that when my mother asked, she wasn't really asking, she was assigning. So I transferred to a role that let me work closer to home. I told my manager it was temporary. I told myself the same thing. I packed my life into boxes, traded my view for a smaller place 15 minutes from my parents, and started driving the familiar roads again. My brother Grant lived even closer, 5 minutes away, but somehow the calls never went to him first. He had his own life, my mother would say. He had so much on his plate. He ran the family business, after all. The business had always belonged to my father, Harold Caldwell, a storage and distribution company that started as a single warehouse and grew into something that kept the bills paid and the family proud. Grant took it over when he was in his 20s, charismatic and confident, the kind of man who could talk a bank manager into smiling. My mother loved that about him. She called it leadership. I handled the parts no one wanted to see. I did not work at the warehouse, at least not officially. My day job was operations at Blue Rock Logistics, a regional freight company with a polished office and endless meetings. But after hours, I was the quiet support system for Caldwell Storage Group. I helped renegotiate a line of credit when a vendor threatened to walk. I covered a shortfall in payroll when a big client paid late. I cleaned up paperwork when Grant missed deadlines because he was too busy making deals. I did it without telling anyone because I wanted to believe my help was temporary too. My mother would touch my arm at Sunday dinner, her fingers light and approving, and say, "You have always been the strong one. I can count on you." It sounded like praise. It felt like a lock clicking into place. The first time my father forgot my name, I pretended I did not notice. We were sitting at the kitchen table in my parents' house, the same table where I had done homework and cried over breakups and listened to my mother talk about what a good family looks like. My father held his coffee cup with both hands like it was the only steady thing in the room. He looked at me, blinking hard, and said, "Marla, can you pass the salt?" My mother laughed softly, like it was cute. "Harold, it's Maren, your daughter." He smiled, embarrassed, then reached for the salt himself. I watched his hand shake and I felt something cold travel up my spine. After that, the hospital visits became regular. Tests, scans, follow-ups. My mother kept a notebook in her purse and asked all the questions. Grant came when it was convenient. I came every time. One Thursday in late summer, I drove straight from work to the hospital, still wearing my badge on a lanyard, my hair pulled back tight because I hadn't had time to fix it. Grant was waiting in the lobby, leaning against a column like he belonged there. He looked up when he saw me and smiled in a way that made other people relax. "There you are," he said. "I knew you would come." I wanted to say, "Of course I did," because that was what he expected to hear. Instead, I asked how Dad was doing. "Same as yesterday," he said. "Mom's upstairs. Listen, we need to talk about something quick." He walked me toward the coffee kiosk, away from the nurses and the families sitting in clusters. His voice lowered, like he was doing me a favor. "With Dad in and out like this, we need cleaner authority at the warehouse. The bank is asking questions, vendors are nervous, and Mom is stressed. I need you to sign a couple of things so I can keep things moving." I frowned. "Sign what things?" "Nothing big," he said, waving one hand like he was brushing dust off a shelf. "Just a business resolution and a limited signing authority for the company accounts. It lets me handle routine payments, deposits, vendor checks, basic banking operations. Nothing that changes ownership, nothing that touches the trust. This is just so the warehouse doesn't fall apart while we're sitting in hospital chairs." Upstairs, my father was lying in a bed with an IV in his arm. My mother was sitting beside him, her posture stiff, her lipstick perfect. She looked up when I walked in, relief flooding her features like I was a rescue team. "Thank God," she said. "I was starting to worry." Grant followed me in and held up the folder. "Maren's going to help us keep things organized," he said. My mother reached for my hand. Her group was warm and firm. "You are the one we can count on. You have always been the strong one. Families need one steady person, otherwise everyone pulls in different directions and everything collapses." I stared at my father's face, at the faint lines around his eyes, at the way his chest rose and fell like a slow tide. He looked peaceful, unaware of the conversation happening over his body like a negotiation. I signed. I told myself I signed because I loved my father. I told myself I signed because I didn't want the business to crumble and take him with it. I told myself I signed because it was temporary, because I was strong, because that's what strong people do. When I handed the folder back to Grant, he smiled like a problem had been solved. My mother squeezed my hand once more and satisfied, and turned her attention back to my father. That night, I stayed until visiting hours ended. I walked the long hallway to the elevator, the smell of antiseptic clinging to my clothes. In the car, I sat with the engine off for a full minute, listening to my own breathing, slow and controlled, like I was calming someone else. On the drive home, the streets were empty, the kind of empty that makes you hear your own thoughts too clearly. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt a faint discomfort I could not explain, like I had stepped into a room and the door had clicked shut behind me. At a red light, I watched my reflection in the rearview mirror, a woman with tired eyes, trying to look like she was fine, the same woman who always showed up, who always signed, who always took the call. When the light turned green, I drove on, still believing I had done the right thing, still unable to admit that something in me had cracked, small and quiet, and that the sound of it would not leave me alone. Chapter 2. The Funeral, the Trust, and the First Quiet Exclusion. 3 years after I signed those papers in the hospital, I was standing in the same building again, but this time my father did not open his eyes. The call came on a gray Monday in early March, the kind of morning where the sky feels low enough to press on your shoulders. My mother, Diane, spoke in a voice that sounded rehearsed, as if she had practiced it in the mirror before dialing. "He is gone, Maren. Your dad is gone." I remember staring at the kitchen counter while she spoke, noticing a crack in the laminate I had meant to fix for months. My mind latched onto that small detail like it could keep everything else from collapsing. I drove to the hospital on instinct, the route familiar enough that my hands moved without instruction. Grant was already there, standing in the hallway outside my father's room. His jacket was neatly buttoned, his hair combed back, like he had decided how he wanted to be seen before the day even began. "Hey," he said softly, "I was just about to call you again." I nodded and walked past him. Inside the room, my father looked smaller than I remembered. His skin had lost its warmth, his hands folded carefully on his chest, as if someone had arranged him that way. The machines were silent. That silence felt heavier than any noise the hospital could make. My mother sat near the window, her purse balanced on her lap, her posture straight. When she looked up at me, her eyes were dry. "We did everything we could," she said. I touched my father's hand. It was cool, already distant. I whispered that I was there, even though I knew it was too late for that to matter. The days that followed blurred together. Phone calls, paperwork, lists of things that needed to be done. My mother moved through it all with quiet efficiency. Grant handled the arrangements with the confidence of someone used to making decisions. I filled in the gaps without being asked. The funeral took place 4 days later at a small church in Maple Ridge. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting soft colors onto the polished wood. People spoke about my father's dedication, his loyalty, his steady presence. They shook my hand and told me how lucky I was to have such a good family. I smiled and thanked them. I stood when I was supposed to stand. I sat when I was supposed to sit. At the reception, Grant moved through the room like a host. He spoke to former clients, old friends, business associates. My mother stayed close to him, her hand occasionally resting on his arm. They looked united, composed, like the picture people expected to see. I was refilling the coffee urn when I noticed them in the corner, speaking with a woman in a navy suit. Grant leaned in, his voice low. My mother nodded at intervals. Something about the scene made my stomach tighten. When I walked over, Grant turned first. "Maren," he said, "this is Laura Bennett. She works with estate planning." Laura offered her hand. I shook it automatically. "Your father was very thorough," she said. "He wanted to make sure everything was handled smoothly." Smoothly. The word settled uneasily in my chest. "We will be in touch," Laura added, looking at Grant and my mother. "There are a few matters to review regarding the trust." My mother smiled politely. "Thank you." No one looked at me. That night, I stayed at my parents' house. My mother did not want to sleep alone, so I took the couch. I listened to the familiar sounds of the house settling, the tick of the clock in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator. It felt strange to be there without my father's presence anchoring the place. A week later, I was back at work when an email popped up from Laura Bennett. The subject line read, "Caldwell Family Trust, Next Steps." I opened it, expecting a meeting invitation for all of us. Instead, it was a brief summary of a discussion that had already happened. As discussed today, we will proceed with reviewing the trust and preparing an amendment draft. Documents will be circulated as needed. I scanned the recipients and noticed my name at the bottom. I had been copied after the email was sent. I called Grant immediately. "We met with her today," he said, sounding cheerful. "Just initial stuff." "Why was I not included?" I asked. There was a pause. "Mom was overwhelmed," he said. "I did not want to burden you." "I'm his daughter, too." "Of course you are," he replied, "but you are not involved in the business. This is mostly administrative." Administrative. another word that reduced my role to something optional. At dinner the following Sunday, I tried again. The table was set perfectly, as always. My mother served the meal without comment. I asked about the trust. Grant answered before my mother could. "We're organizing it. You do not need to worry." I looked at my mother. She did not contradict him. "I've been helping with the company for years," I said quietly. "That was your choice," Grant replied. "No one forced you." My mother focused on her plate. Her silence felt louder than his words. The next day, my supervisor at work asked me into his office. He spoke carefully, explaining that my leadership potential was clear, but my focus had slipped. He warned me gently that constant personal interruptions could stall my career. I promised it would improve. That evening, I opened an old file drawer in my apartment and found a draft trust amendment. My name was still there, but no longer central. I was listed as contingent. When I confronted my mother, she waved it off as a draft. "You are making this harder than it needs to be," she said. "We need calm right now." I left without arguing. Driving home, I realized something had shifted, not in a dramatic way, not yet, but I was no longer standing at the center of the family. I was being quietly moved aside, and everyone seemed to expect me to accept it without protest. Chapter 3: Power of Attorney, the betrayal that didn't need a voice. Clarity stayed with me in the days that followed, not as comfort, but as a steady pressure behind my eyes, like something I could no longer pretend not to see. I did not confront anyone right away. I went to work, logged into meetings, answered emails, and listened to people talk about contingency plans and supply chain delays, like the world had not quietly shifted under my feet. At night, I cooked dinner for Leela and asked about her classes. I folded laundry. I waited. 2 weeks after I found the power of attorney, my mother called. "I need you to come by," she said. "Grant and I are meeting with the attorney again." "With Evelyn Hart?" I asked. "Yes," she replied. "It'll be good for you to hear everything." It was the first time she had acknowledged that I might deserve to hear anything at all. We met at a small office downtown, glass walls and neutral art, the kind of place designed to feel calm and official. Grant was already there when I arrived, seated confidently at the conference table, a legal pad in front of him. My mother sat beside him, her purse tucked carefully at her feet. Evelyn Hart answered a moment later, her expression polite but unreadable. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "Let's take a seat." I sat across from my brother. He smiled at me, tight and practiced. "Maren," he said, "I'm glad you're here." I nodded. "So am I." Evelyn began outlining the structure of my mother's finances and the trust. She spoke clearly, efficiently, explaining terms and timelines. I listened closely, absorbing details I had been excluded from for months. "As you know," Evelyn said, "Mrs. Caldwell executed a durable financial power of attorney in October of 2019, appointing Grant as her attorney in fact. This allows him to act on her behalf in financial matters, including trust administration, banking, and contractual decisions." I looked at my mother. She stared straight ahead. "Is there any reason this was not disclosed to me?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Evelyn paused. "Disclosure is at the discretion of the principal. Mrs. Caldwell did not instruct us to notify you." I turned to my mother. "Why?" She exhaled slowly. "Because you question everything." The words landed without heat, like a statement of fact. "I question things because I care," I said, "because I've been involved." Grant leaned forward. "You've been involved emotionally," he said, "not operationally." I felt something tighten in my chest. I handled payroll gaps. I negotiated with vendors. I kept the company afloat when you were traveling. He shook his head. "That doesn't make you leadership. That makes you support." Evelyn shifted slightly in her chair, but said nothing. "So this was decided without me?" I said. My mother finally looked at me. "We needed one consistent person," she said. "One voice. You always complicate things." I stared at her, searching for something softer, something maternal. "I'm your daughter." She replied, And Grant is my son. He doesn't make me anxious. That was it. Not money, not law, anxiety. I was not chosen because I made her uncomfortable by asking to be seen. The meeting ended without resolution. Evelyn summarized next steps, Grant collected his papers, my mother stood and smoothed her jacket, already moving on. In the hallway outside the office, Grant stopped me. "Can we talk?" he asked. I followed him to a quiet corner near the elevator. He lowered his voice. "You're taking this personally," he said. "It's not about you." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "It's always about me when you need help." "That's not fair," he replied. "It's accurate," I said. "Why didn't you tell me about the power of attorney?" He rubbed his forehead. "Because you would have argued." "So you decided for me?" "I decided for Mom," he said. "She needs stability. You bring questions, doubt, emotion." I felt my jaw tighten. "So my role is to support quietly and disappear when decisions are made?" He said, "That's not what I said. That's exactly what you did." The elevator doors opened. Grant stepped inside. "Try not to make this harder than it needs to be," he said, before the doors closed. I stood there long after the elevator disappeared, the hum of the building filling the space he left behind. That night, Leela found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at my laptop without typing. "You look like you lost a fight," she said gently. "I didn't fight, that's the problem." She pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "Grandma still hasn't called," she said. "I know," I replied. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked again. "No," I said firmly, "you didn't." She studied my face. "Then why does it feel like we're being erased?" The question hit deeper than anything my brother or mother had said. "Sometimes," I told her slowly, "people only know how to love when they're in control." She frowned. "That sounds lonely." "It is," I said. Later, after Leela went to bed, I opened my email and reread the notes from the meeting. The language was clean, neutral, professional. It framed decisions as practical, necessary, inevitable. I saw it clearly then. I wasn't being excluded because I wasn't important. I was being excluded because I was independent. I did not fall into line easily. I did not confuse silence with loyalty. The next morning, I called Evelyn Hart again. "I need to understand my position," I said. "Legally," she replied, "you are not prohibited from anything. Practically, without authority, you are outside the decision chain." "And if I want to protect myself?" I asked. There was a pause. "Then I would recommend formal boundaries, written communication, counsel present, documentation." I thanked her and hung up. I drafted an email that afternoon. It was brief and direct. I stated that any future discussions involving family assets, financial obligations, or decisions affecting my participation would be conducted in writing and through legal counsel. I copied Grant, my mother, and Evelyn. I read it twice. Then I sent it. There was no immediate response. That evening, I cooked dinner and listened to Leela talk about a paper she was writing on family systems. She laughed at the irony when she realized. "Guess we're a case study," she said. I smiled, small but real. "We are." When my phone buzzed later, it was a message from my mother. "We'll discuss this later," she wrote. I set the phone face down. For the first time in a long while, I felt steady, not victorious, not angry, just aligned. I had stopped trying to be understood by people who benefited from misunderstanding me. I went to bed knowing the rules had changed, not because they agreed to it, but because I had. Chapter 4. Withdrawal is not weakness. Enough did not erase the damage, but it stopped the bleeding. In the weeks that followed, I learned how loud absence could be. I stopped answering calls that came without context. I stopped stepping in before problems had names. I stopped fixing things quietly so no one had to feel uncomfortable. The silence I left behind was not empty, it echoed. My mother tested it first. "You've changed," she said on the phone one afternoon, her voice tight with accusation. "I've adjusted," I replied. "To what?" she asked. "To punishing us?" "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm just not volunteering anymore." She scoffed. "That's the same thing." I did not argue. I let the line go quiet until she filled it again. "Your brother is under enormous pressure," she said. "He's doing his best." "So am I said, and ended the call before she could respond. At first, I felt guilty. Guilt had always been the fastest way back into my old role. But something had shifted. The guilt no longer controlled my hands. It just sat there, uncomfortable and loud, like a visitor who had overstayed their welcome. At Blue Rock Logistics, the change was immediate and undeniable. With fewer interruptions, my days stretched out in a way that felt almost luxurious. I finished projects early, I caught mistakes before they became emergencies. My team stopped hovering, trusting that I was present and decisive. Marcus stopped by my office one morning, leaning against the doorframe. "You look different," he said. "Tired," I guessed. "Focused," he corrected. "The board approved your promotion." The words took a second to land. "Regional Operations Director," he continued, "effective next month." I sat back in my chair, my hands flat on the desk, grounding myself. "Thank you," I said. "You earned it," he replied. "And whatever boundary you put in place outside of here, don't dismantle it. This job will eat you alive if you let it." I nodded, understanding more than he knew. That afternoon, my phone lit up again. Grant. I let it ring. A text followed almost immediately. "We have a serious problem." I waited 10 minutes before responding. "Send details by email." The reply came back sharp. "This is not the time to play games." I typed slowly. "This is exactly the time." When the email arrived, it was worse than I expected. Everpeak Freight had escalated their compliance review into a formal audit. They wanted 3 years of documentation, chain of custody records, safety certifications, vendor insurance proofs, training logs, everything. On top of that, the bank had frozen Caldwell Storage Group's operating credit line. The reason was vague but familiar. Conflicting authorization records, overlapping signatures, incomplete revocations. The mess I had been quietly preventing for years had finally surfaced. Grant called again. I answered this time. "We're in trouble," he said without greeting. "Everpeak is threatening to suspend shipments. The bank won't release funds. Payroll is due in 10 days. I closed my eyes, listening to his voice shake in a way I had never heard before. "What do you need?" I asked. "You need to fix it," he said. "You know how this works." I opened my eyes. "No," I said. "I know how I used to fix it." A pause, then frustration. "Maren, this isn't about pride. It's about process and accountability. You're really going to let this burn?" he said. I chose my words carefully. "I'm not letting anything burn. I'm stepping out of the fire you started." He exhaled sharply. "Mom is panicking." "I'm not responsible for her panic," I said. "She thinks you're abandoning the family." I felt the old pull, the instinct to soothe, to promise. I pushed it away. "I'm not abandoning anyone," I said. "I'm refusing to disappear." The call ended without resolution. 2 days later, Grant showed up at my apartment again. This time, he looked smaller, tired. The confidence he wore like armor had cracked. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside and let him in. He dropped in a chair, rubbing his face. "I didn't think it would get this bad," he said. "I know," I replied. He looked up. "Do you?" "Yes," I said, "because I've been holding it together for years." He flinched, but didn't argue. "The bank wants one clear authority," he said. "Evelyn says the power of attorney complicates things." "It does, because it was never integrated properly." He nodded. "Mom signed it fast. She was scared. And no one slowed her down. No one explained the consequences." He stared at the floor. "I thought I was helping." "You were controlling," I said quietly. "There's a difference." He swallowed. "Can you help now?" I leaned back in my chair. "I can help in a defined way." He looked up, hopeful. "I will provide documents I personally handled," I continued, "through Evelyn. I will not call the bank. I will not negotiate with Everpeak. I will not clean up gaps created after I stepped away." "That's it?" he asked. "That's it," I said. He sat with that for a long moment. "It's not enough," he said finally. "It's appropriate," I replied. He nodded slowly, like someone accepting a loss. That night, my mother called again. "You're tearing this family apart," she said, her voice trembling. "No," I replied. "I stopped holding it together by myself." "You're selfish," she snapped. I felt the sting, but it no longer cut the same way. "I'm self-protecting," I said. "You taught me that, even if you don't like how I'm doing it." She cried then, real tears this time. I let her. I did not rush to fix them. Over the next week, the consequences multiplied. Everpeak suspended new shipments pending audit. Vendors demanded assurances. Employees whispered. The business felt the absence of the invisible labor I had provided for so long. At work, my new role demanded long hours and sharp decisions. I thrived in it, not because it was easy, but because it was honest. My effort matched my authority. One evening, as I sat at my desk reviewing audit documents I had agreed to share, Lila came in and leaned against the doorway. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I am," I said, surprised to realize it was true. She watched me for a moment. "Grandma texted me." I looked up. "What did she say?" "She said she misses me and that things are complicated." I nodded. "That sounds like her." Lila hesitated. "Do I have to answer?" "No," I said. "You get to choose." She smiled faintly. "I like that." When Grant left my apartment for the last time that week, I stood by the window and watched his car disappear down the street. I did not feel victorious. I felt clear. For years, my silence had been mistaken for stability, my flexibility for loyalty, my sacrifice for love. Now, with my hands off the wheel of a system that never truly included me, I could see the shape of what I had been propping up. And I understood, finally, that withdrawing was not weakness. It was the first honest act I had made in a very long time. Chapter 5. The Quiet Form of Karma. The unraveling did not arrive with shouting or lawsuits or police cars. It arrived in envelopes, emails, and meetings that ended with phrases like pending review and effective immediately. By early 2024, Caldwell's storage group was no longer running on confidence, it was running on delays. Everpeak Freight terminated the contract after the compliance audit concluded. They did not accuse anyone of fraud. They did not need to. The findings spoke for themselves. Training records that stopped and restarted without explanation, chain of custody logs that were inconsistent across years, vendor insurance certificates that had expired and been quietly renewed weeks later. Each issue alone was survivable. Together, they painted a picture no client wanted to trust. The bank followed with restraint that felt almost cruel. They froze the operating credit line and requested a full restructuring of authorization. They wanted clarity, one signer, one chain of responsibility. They wanted exactly what my brother had claimed to create, and exactly what had never truly existed. Grant called me on a Wednesday night in April. His voice was tight, stripped of its usual ease. "We're losing the warehouse," he said. "Not today, but soon." I leaned back against my kitchen counter and listened. I did not rush to fill the silence. "The bank wants new guarantees," he continued. "They want revised authority. Mom keeps saying she didn't understand what she signed." I closed my eyes for a moment. "She understood what she wanted," I said. "She wanted control without resistance." Grant exhaled sharply. "You don't have to be like this." "Like what?" I asked. "Detached," he said, "like you're watching this happen from above." I looked around my apartment, at the quiet order of a life I had built deliberately. "I'm not above it," I said. "I'm just not holding it together anymore." There was a long pause. Then he said quietly, "We could have used you." I answered honestly, "You did, for years." After we hung up, I stood at the window and watched the street below. Cars passed, lights changed. Life kept moving in ways my family had always pretended they controlled. A week later, I received a formal notice from Bennett and Hart Legal Group. The trust was under administrative review due to external pressure from financial institutions. No accusations, no blame, just consequences. Evelyn's language was precise, neutral, and careful. She included an updated draft of the trust amendment. My name was still there, still contingent. It should have hurt. It didn't. I realized then that the pain had already passed. What remained was understanding. Diane called that evening. I almost didn't answer, but I did because for the first time, I could listen without being pulled back into the role she needed me to play. "Maren," she said. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. "I don't know what's happening anymore." I said nothing at first. They're asking questions, the bank, the lawyers. Everyone wants something from me. I waited. I gave everything to this family. I stayed, I sacrificed, and now it feels like I'm being punished. I recognized the language: sacrifice, family, punishment, the same words she had used my entire life to keep me in place. "I'm not punishing you," I said gently. "I'm also not saving you." Her breath hitched. "How can you say that?" "Because it's the truth," I replied. "I can care without disappearing." She was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was strained. "Your father would be ashamed." The old version of me would have folded at that. The old version would have apologized, reassured her, promised to fix whatever was breaking. Instead, I felt a strange calm. "My father trusted me," I said. "You didn't." She ended the call without another word. The next time we were all in the same room was in October, in a conference space at Evelyn's office. The windows overlooked the city, gray and steady. Grant sat across from me, thinner now, his confidence worn down by months of pressure. Diane sat beside him, hands folded tightly in her lap. Evelyn explained the revised structure, new authorization boundaries, clear separation between personal and business assets, documentation that left no room for interpretation. The kind of clarity that comes only after confusion has cost too much. No one argued. There was nothing left to argue with. When the meeting ended, Grant stopped me in the hallway. "You got what you wanted," he said quietly. I shook my head. "No. You think I wanted this to happen. I didn't." "Then how does it feel like you won?" he asked. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw someone who had always confused control with strength. "I didn't win," I said. "I just stopped losing." He swallowed. "We might sell the warehouse." I nodded. "I hope it gives you space to breathe." He searched my face, maybe for bitterness, maybe for triumph. He found neither. That December, Lila and I spent the holidays alone. No forced dinners, no polite tension. We cooked food we actually liked. We watched movies my mother used to dismiss as silly. We laughed loudly. We slept in. One evening, while we were walking through the neighborhood wrapped in coats, Lila slipped her arm through mine. "I used to think love meant staying quiet," she said. I stopped and looked at her. "So did I." She smiled. "I'm glad you stopped." So was I. I never reclaimed what I once believed was owed to me. I did not receive an inheritance that validated my years of sacrifice. I did not receive a family that suddenly understood me. What I received was quieter and far more valuable. I received my autonomy. I received peace that did not depend on approval. I received the ability to choose myself without apology. If you have ever been the reliable one, the strong one, the person who holds everything together while slowly disappearing, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful form of karma is not punishment. It is withdrawal. It is stepping back and letting people face the systems they built without you. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below. And if you want more stories about quiet strength and earned freedom, stay here with me.